Hey there, welcome back to Coding at Home with the Code Hub. Hey, I'm Matt with the Code Hub. Welcome back. Today is day 2 of Sonic Workshop. We'll be working through that Swift Playground a little bit more today. Yesterday we went over closures and how they work and what they are and when to use them and why you'd use them. And the playground actually does a really good job of explaining what they are, which is unnamed functions. So you remember from Everyone Can Code Puzzles when we did regular named functions is we would start them out with a func name of the function and then in parentheses any parameters we might want to pass in so we can use those parameters when we're writing code inside the function so we can do different things and make them a bit more flexible. We're going to actually take a look at that kind of stuff, reusing parameters and reusing code and making it very flexible, because that's one of our main goals as a programmer is we want to write code that we don't have to go revisit all the time and that we can use from other places. And the real superpower of being a developer when you write that code once and you make it super flexible is that now you've got this code that can be used absolutely anywhere. You don't have to go revisit it and write it again. You can actually just keep using that code, and if there are any bugs in it, you fix it in one place and it's fixed everywhere you use it. So it's kind of a huge advantage to be able to write these functions and write them well, and then fix your bugs and take advantage of parameters. Closures they're a little bit different. We tend to write those blocks of code that get executed around the area where we call them. So like in the set on touch handler, instead of creating a new function all off to the side, we could actually just write that code in line. This is useful if it's only used maybe one or two places. But we're going to take a look at that today. So let's stop talking about it and let's jump over to the iPad and get working on Sonic Workshop. All right, here we go. So we're off on the iPad again. We're going to open up Swift Playgrounds. For those of you who missed yesterday, we got this Sonic Workshop playground from the More Playgrounds. We went to see all. And we grabbed it from the challenges here. It's another intermediate playground, just like Lights Camera Code. And in fact, it's structured very like Lights Camera Code, even down to the way it teaches you what to do on each screen. So if you haven't already, go and download Sonic Workshop. We're going to go back. And I'm going to start working on my copy here. So we'll open that up. All right. So we're still on that first page, Cave Sounds. We have our scene where we set our background image. We play music. Now we saw yesterday in the directions that we can actually change this music that we play. We created a new graphic. So a crystal. And it's of type graphic. We can pass in an image as our parameter to the initializer. Then we place our graphic on the scene somewhere. And this scene has the same kind of grid that we had for Lights Camera Code when we were placing camera elements.
It's just stuck on your home screen.
It's stuck on my home screen. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Oh, wait, are you... Yeah, it's showing...
Oh, yeah, it would help.
This, not that.
All right, cool. Thank you for the help. All right, my crack QA team helping me out. Let's try this again. It's not too much fun looking at just my home screen. This is a lot better. So we've opened up Swift Playgrounds. We're now sitting on Cave Sounds. So at the top here, this is where we set our background image for our scene. We call a function to play music, and that's our background music. Now, you remember I turned that off because we didn't want it playing constantly over us talking and over us playing around with a few different things. We create a variable here called crystal, which is of type graphic, because we use this graphic type initializer here where we pass in an image. And in fact, so we did that yesterday. If you don't have your variable declared yet, create one now. I'm actually going to create a new variable So let's see. So we had a few different types of crystals. We're going to call this a gem, this one. We're going to create a new graphic to put on the scene. I'm going to start typing in graphic with a capital G because that's the type. There it is in my autocomplete bar. The autocomplete is super handy, even in Xcode when we're building full iOS apps for an iPad or for Apple TV. You tend to use autocomplete just because there's no way you can remember absolutely every little thing that you need to develop every little nuance to the structure of your code. Autocomplete makes it so easy for you to focus on just the stuff that you're doing that's different here. So here's autocomplete tells me that this initializer takes an image, and we'll use this image literal here. So we can go pick one. So let's see. So we have a pink crystal right now. Let's use maybe this thing here. We'll tap on use. All right. So there's our second graphic. In this line here, we're placing our crystal at this point. So let's place our new gem on the scene as well. And we don't want to do gem. It's not a function we call on that. It's a function we call on the scene. So I'm going to start typing scene. And just like before with graphic, instead of using the one with a capital S, we want to use the one with the lowercase s because that's the property that we want to access. We don't want to call this method on the type scene. So we'll use a dot for dot notation to call the place method. And so now we're going to place the graphic, which is our gem, at a certain point. Now we can do what we've done here and create a point, initialize it, and then pass it immediately into this place method. Or we could do something like this. We'll call it gem point. You'll see I'm using camel case here with a lowercase g for the gem and then a capital P for point for the name of my variable. And we'll create a new point here using the type. And then this parentheses to create my initializer. So let's see. Let's have it at the same height. So we'll have it at minus 180. Oops, that's not the same height. Here's the same height over here in the Y. And instead of having it at 240, which is over here, we're going to have it at minus 240. So we'll have it on the other side of the screen. Oops. So there's minus 240. Now if I'd left that X in there, what do you think is going to happen? Nothing yet. If we try running our code, we'll have a small error here. So we need to fill in this placeholder. Okay, fair enough. Now, instead of initializing it like we did here, I'm actually going to refer to this gem point variable I just created. So I'm going to type in gem point. And you might wonder, why is that not showing up down here? Well, we can see that gem point, Swift hasn't been able to recognize it as a variable yet because we've got a red dot next to it. So let's tap on that, and it says use of unresolved identifier x240. It's because that's not a number. So we'll use the minus sign, 240. So now let's try running it. Okay, there's my lab background music playing. There's my crystal scaling up. Now if I tap on my other one, if I tap on this gem that I added, nothing happens. Because I haven't defined an on-touch handler for my gem. So let's stop this. And my music goes away. So I've done the work of placing the new gem on the scene. I had this scale here that I was using. I'm actually going to take this out because, well, actually we can leave it in because I remember we had it yesterday where we would increment this number so the scale would go up every single time we touched the crystal. That didn't work out so well. We crashed at a certain point. So we took that out so it didn't keep growing. But now we're going to add a touch handler to our gem. And if you scroll through the directions here, this tells you how to place your graphic. We ran our code and saw it in play. And then it gave us these two options for handling touches on our graphic. We could either write a function that we then pass in to the onTouch handler, or we can use this closure option. And that's what we used for our crystal here. So we did set onTouch handler, and we're passing in a function. So we have to define the function, the body of the function here inside these curly braces. So this is the code that will get run. They have a good note here that's worth reading, why use a closure, where they explain what the different elements are. This is going to be more important when we start passing in parameters to those functions we use as closures. All right, so let's add, we can add some visual flair. What we're going to do now though is add an onTouch handler to our gem. So I'm going to do gem dot set onTouch handler, and this is where we're going to grab it from. And now we're going to add some code. So we're just going to have it play a sound when we touch the gem. So let's go find that play sound. So we're playing Weird Yoga when we touch on the crystal. Let's hit the dot. And it'll bring up a few options of different sounds we can play. We can do Alien Hello, Announcement, Dinner Bell, Eerie. Let's do Eerie. And we can set the volume. We'll set this one to 90, so it's a little quieter than the Weird Yoga. Let's try running our code to see what we get. Okay, we've got our background music straight off the bat. We'll touch on the gem here. Okay. Kind of an interesting scene. All right, so I'm not going to add any more visual flair to my gem. You can definitely add some more to your crystal if you want, or to your gem. You can add the glow method, you can call that. You can call shake with a duration that you can set, or you can set the scale property. Now, we also looked at this where we had an option to add more graphics, which is what we just did. We can color our graphics. So let's try this one out. We're actually going to tint our gem. So we'll say gem dot, we'll do set tint color, and we'll use a color literal here down in the autocomplete bar to pick our color. Let's give it kind of a green tint. And the blend, well, we can experiment with this. Let's use 0.9 because that's what they use up above. We can change the background music. We were playing cave music, now we're playing kind of lab music. We can change the background image, which we also did. Let's try running this and see what our gem looks like with a tint color on it. Okay, you can see it kind of went from that yellowish look to a more green look. And if we turn off the background music for a second by tapping on the volume icon there, that's just the eerie sound. And that's just the Weird Yoga sound. So kind of interesting. All right, and the question I left you guys with yesterday was, which code snippet here has a closure? So the crystal.glow, crystal.set onTouch handler, and then a bit of code. Or this one where we have a function defined, touch handler, and then set onTouch handler. Which one has a closure? Can you have a guess? Now it's not this one, because this one's just calling a method. So it's a function on that type. This one down here, we've defined a function, and then we pass in the named function. So that's not a closure, because a closure is an unnamed function. But this one here, this has a bit of code that we run, and we don't have any other reference to it other than we're setting it as the on-touch handler. So this would be our code snippet with a closure. So now what we're going to do is move on to the next page where we're going to write some code in a shared file, which of course we've done before for lights, camera, code. So you can see we start out on this page in the crystals file, crystals shared file. So if we want to get back to the code that we're actually going to run, we tap on this main.swift file. And you can see all we have here is a scene.background image. So we set it to this scene behind us here. And then we play the music.turtle. And then we have a comment where it says call our function. So let's go back to crystals and see what function it is we're going to write. So like we talked about a little bit in the lead up, parameters are something that we can pass into a function to change what happens in the function. So it might be something like a duration. So we'll have something happen over a longer period of time or a shorter period of time. Or it could be something like this, like a distance, where maybe the thing will go further. We use this in functions that we experienced for the Turtle Graphics Playground, where we said, okay, move forward, and then we passed in a number, and the monkey would draw a longer line if you gave it a bigger number. We're also going to use, for functions, something that we haven't used a lot, which is a return type. So far, we've mostly been using functions where we just pass in information and it does something. Maybe it adds something to the screen, but all the work is done inside the function. We don't return anything back. One of the real powerful features of functions is you can actually return information back to the place where it was called from. So we're going to see that in this example here. So let's get started. So this is the function breakdown. In fact, this is a function breakdown of over here too. We use that public keyword because it's in a new file. So we need to make sure that everyone can use this function. Image and sound here are two parameters that we can pass in. So we're going to be creating a crystal that's going to have a certain look and it's going to have a certain sound. And we can define that straight up front when we call this create crystal function. If we tap on this blue dot here, this arrow here, this dash followed by a greater than sign, indicates that we're going to get back what comes next. So what's going to happen with this function is we're going to return a graphic. So we'll build a graphic based on the parameters that someone passes in. And then inside here, we create a graphic. Using that graphic initializer, we pass in the image that we got from our create crystal function. And then we return the graphic here at the end. This is how we return stuff back to the place that it's called from. So then it has a note here about why code in a shared file. Of course, that's because in a shared file, then we can use it across the whole playground. And it won't go away when we move from file to file or from lesson to lesson. So let's take a look. So we have our create crystal function. We pass in an image, we pass in a sound, we create the graphic. Now we can add a touch handler, that code's missing, and then we return the graphic at the end. Okay. So if we read a little bit more about this create crystal function, we can see it's going to return a graphic. This means that we can call create crystal and store the return value as a variable. So we're going to now call this create crystal function in that main file. So this bookmark looking file. So let's tap on that. We're going to write some code that looks very like this. So this is our create a variable syntax where we say let crystal. So let, and then we'll give our variable a name. I'm going to call it crystal. And we're going to call create crystal Here it is. This is our function that we have defined in that crystals file. We'll pass in an image. And let's see, we'll pass in maybe this one here. We'll use that one. And then we can pass in a sound of type sonic sound. So we'll do dot. And here we'll use bloops. That one sounds good. So now that we've created our crystal and saved the result in a variable called crystal, now we have to add it to the scene. So let's do that. I'm going to start typing scene. I'm going to pick my variable scene. So scene dot place. Here's my place method. So the thing that I got back from my create crystal function is a graphic, so I can use crystal in there. And then let's create a point on the fly. We won't create a variable for that one again. We'll give the X and Y. Let's see, where did they place it? They placed it at 0 and 0. Okay, so right in the middle of the scene. Let's run our code and see what we get. Okay, cool. So we have a crystal right on the back of this giant turtle. If we tap on it, nothing happens. And we're playing this very inspiring turtle music in the background. So instead of having the advantage here is that, so before what we did was we had this code here in Cave Sounds where we created the crystal ourselves. We placed the crystal, and then we set an on-touch handler down here. Now that's fine, but maybe we want to do that over and over again, and we want to set an on-touch handler so that every single time I create a new graphic to display on the screen, I want it to have the behavior that when I touch on it, it's going to play a sound. You can see that we actually had to, the first time we ran this, we didn't have our gem on-touch handler set, so it didn't play any sound. The advantage of making a function like this, here, my create crystal one is, now I can write a touch handler that'll work every single time. If I use this create crystal function to create my graphics to display on the screen, I can also have it automatically add a sound to play every single time I touch one of those graphics. So let's skip forward to that explanation here. All right, so now we're going to use a closure to make our graphic play a sound when it's touched, just like we did before. So, like before, we're going to do graphic dot. We'll go find set on touch handler. There it is. And we'll write our code to play a sound. So we'll scroll over and find play sound. There's play instrument, play music, play sound. And I'm going to use this one because we're having people pass in a sonic sound type. And this method here, or this function here, takes the sonic sound as its first parameter. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have it play the sound that was passed in. So if you remember from our advanced functions and parameters lessons, the way to access this sound that someone passed in is to use this name here, that parameter name, which is sound. So I'm going to tap on the sound in the autocomplete bar. We'll set the volume to be the same always. And you can see if you get stuck, there's some help here. There's a little need help option. So yeah, they're doing the same thing we're doing. In fact, they're adding a little bit of a glow to the graphic. So let's do that as well. So we give another bit of feedback to the user when they tap on the graphic. So we'll do glow. And let's run our code and touch that crystal. All right, there we go. Okay. Now, if I want to change that crystal, if I'm not happy with the sound it's making, I can change the sound I pass in to the create crystal function. So let's tap on bloops and delete it. And let's add maybe clomp. So we'll run our code. Okay, not bad. Maybe it's kind of at odds with what we're trying to do here. So maybe we'll just add birds. Okay. All right, that sounds a bit better. I think we'll stick with that. But you can see that when I touch on the crystal, it glows, and I didn't have to have that code cluttering up this look here. And now I can focus on doing something else, maybe adding new crystals using this same create crystal function. And all my create crystal logic is in here in this crystals file. So let's stop that. All right, so we can hear our code. And this is really handy because now we have a whole separate file that's doing a bit of work for us, and it's going to do more work for us in the coming days. And it's able to get that work that it's done back out to us by returning a graphic with an on-touch handler set on it and an image set on the graphic as well. All because we have this funny looking arrow here. This is a really powerful way to organize your code because you can now do so much work, keep it off in a separate file so it's not cluttering up your view here in your main file, and keep this for just designing exactly what you have on the screen. So this is where we can focus on where we place our crystals and everything. So let's try, just for kicks, since we added a separate gem on the previous page, let's try adding a separate gem here. So we can call our function again. We're going to create another variable to store our new graphic that we're going to get returned. We'll call this one gem again, like we did in the previous page. We're going to call our create crystal function. So we'll scroll over and find create crystal. Now when we pass in an image, we'll pass in an image literal. That's this thing down here. So let's see. Well, you know what? This kind of fits the theme of this page. Let's pass in the oyster shell and the pearl. And the sonic sound we're going to use here, we'll use a dot to get the list of all the sounds that we have available to us. And maybe we'll do shipwreck, sounds pretty good. Or actually, let's do tide. We're going with kind of a sea theme for this page. Now, that's it. It's done all the work of setting up an on-touch handler for me. It's done the work of adding a graphic with a particular image. Now, the only thing I have left to do here is add it to the scene. So let's do scene.place. And we can use our new graphic. So I'm going to pick my gem. And we'll give it a new point with X and Y coordinates. Let's move this over a bit. 200, and then we'll have it, I guess, down in the C. So 200 is going to wind up somewhere over here. Minus 200 will wind up down here. Let's try running our code. And then it's nice because now I just have my variable declaration, and then I call a method on my scene to place it. And I have the same thing here. I haven't had to add all the other code that we had in the previous screen where we had our on-touch handlers added there, and I might have forgotten to add one, especially if we're creating a lot of gems to go on this particular page. We might forget to add on-touch handlers for everything. So we've done a good job of creating a function that we can reuse sensibly. All right, so there's one, there's the other. If I tap on my new oyster one, okay, we got a nice wave sound. We get our birds if we tap on the crystal on the back of the turtle. And I like that glow effect for all of them as well, because now I can tell when I'm actually tapping on something by something other than just the sounds. All right, so let's go back to this question here. So what does it mean for a function to return a graphic? Does it mean that the function passes back a value when it's done executing? In this case, a graphic? Does it mean the function takes the type image as an input? Or does it describe the task the function performs? What do you think the answer is? Well, this is actually just the code that's written in between the braces. So if we go back to our function, this is the task the function performs. Now, we try to describe what task the function performs by using descriptive function names. So it's not that one. The function takes the type image as an input. Well, if you remember, this is what's called a parameter that lets us change what happens inside this function. And we can use it here like we did to create our graphic. So it's not that one. So this one here, where the function passes back a value when it's done executing. That's right. That's the big thing that we learned on this particular page, is how to write a function that's going to return something useful that we can use in our code on another page. So let's take a quick look at what we'll be doing tomorrow. So tomorrow, it sounds like we'll be back in that crystals file. And now we're going to write our own function. Remember, being a programmer is we want to try to think ahead of what tasks we might be trying to solve. In these cases, we've got these puzzles that we want to solve. So we're going to write some code to make our life easier down the line. This create crystal function makes our life a lot easier because it saves us writing a lot of code down the line. Now we're going to have an underwater scene. We're going to play some underwater music. And then we're going to figure out how to write our own function tomorrow with a whole set of parameters. We'll be calling some closures. And it should be a lot of fun. So this is this will be a big lesson to help us organize our code a little bit better and to really get ahead of the game and be nice to our future selves. It's always really nice as a developer when you come back to a piece of code and you say, all right, I just need to do a couple quick things. And you look through your code and you say, oh, do you know what? I've already written functions that will help me get most of the way there. That's the key with these creating our own functions. Even in our Everyone Can Code Puzzles lessons, creating a function made it so much easier. So there was so much less to type if we had a lot of the puzzle already figured out and that logic saved somewhere else. So that's what we're going to be working on tomorrow. I hope you guys enjoyed today. I hope you're able to add some more gems to our turtle friend. And we'll see you tomorrow.